we pick up on 20a at the Mishnah about a quarter down the page. So we're continuing the procedure of the Sotah and like exception cases. If she reneges on participation before the scroll is erased, scraped off, then Megillasa, so the scroll still exists. Megillasa nigneses, then it's put in the Genisa, it's in storage, it's hidden away. Not so, we're by her refusing to participate, that stops the process. And the scroll itself, we're not going to destroy it now because we're not going to complete the ritual. And of course, it has God's name in it, so it can't be destroyed for no reason. And what do you do with the mincha, which has already been prepared but hasn't been burned yet? So you scatter the flour on the ashes of the mizbeach. So in other words, it can't be used for anything. It can't be used for this because we're not completing it, and it's already been sanctified for temple use, so you can't use it for anything, so you just scatter the raw flour on the ashes of the altar. You can't use that scroll for a different sotah. Now, even though there's nothing specific about this woman or the husband or the date or anything like that, it's really just a transcription of a parsha from the Torah, can't be used for somebody else. Nimcha kamagila, but if what happens if it's already been, you've already prepared the water and erased the ink, scrape the ink from the scroll into the water, and then she admits, she says, you know what, I'm guilty. So you don't have to proceed with the Sotah procedure. She admits
your pussy hair.
So what do you do? Hamayim nishpachim. So the water that you prepared, you just pour it out. You scatter the flour on the ashes of the altar. So that's it. There's nothing else to do. So what if we've prepared the water, we've erased the scroll, and then she says, I'm not participating. I'm not doing this anymore. We saw this yesterday. So we force her to drink the water against her will. Okay. So she's barely, so we're back to the regular procedure. She drinks the water and she's barely finished the drinking. Right away, her face becomes greenish. Boltos, her eyes bulge. And her veins kind of bulge. And people watching say, take her out, like she's at death's door, she's about to die. We don't want her to cause the temple courtyard to become tummy. Now, if she has some merit, and we saw this last week also, and we'll discuss it in more detail here, if she has some kind of merit on her behalf, so then the effects of the water are not immediate. They're delayed. Depends on what her merit is. Sometimes it delays the process by a year, by 2 years, or by 3 years. Again, the Gemara will investigate this further. From this, Ben Azai says, a person has to teach his daughter Torah, because if she gets a situation where she has to drink the Sotah water, so you'll know that this presumably of the learning of Torah, or it could be that she'll understand that merit is beneficial in the sense that it can delay the Sotah punishment. So I guess this would mean that, like all one's life, all of this woman's life, she would pursue merit, so that should she ever get into a Sotah situation, the negative effects will be delayed. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kol Moami Bita Torah Kilu Lamda Tiflus. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, whoever teaches his daughter Torah, it's like teaching her Tiflus. What does that mean? It's subject to a wide variety of discussions. I don't even know, how to, in light, because this is obviously a sensitive topic, or one that is could be seen as denigrating women, or that it seems to be a negative term, right? That if you teach your Torah, there's something negative about teaching your daughter Torah. Um, so I don't even know how to translate this. But Tiflus is translated here in the Art Scroll as it's like teaching her physical intimacy. So that would fit in here in the sense that, if the reason you're learning Torah is to acquire merits so that you can get your husband to suspect that, even if your husband suspects you of cheating, you won't be right away harmed by the Sotah water. So then that's a negative, right? It's like if you teach your daughter to do good things, or if you teach her Torah in the sense that she'll understand that doing good things can save her life, then in a case of infidelity, then that will enable her to be unfaithful. Rabbi Shua Omer, Rotza Isha B'kav V'tiflus Mitisha Kabin Uprishus. Rabbi Shua says, it sounds like he's saying it's no use. A woman would prefer to have, this appears to be saying that you can't stand in the way of someone who desires physical intimacy, right? Who desires, intimacy with someone. Like you'd rather have only one kav, meaning this is an expression meaning only one basket of possessions, and have that intimacy rather than have 9 baskets and no intimacy. Which seems to be saying that it's no use to try to prevent people from pursuing intimacy. Huhaya Omer, we should also said, Chasid Sotah v'Rasha Arum v'Isha Perusha u'Makos Perushin Harelu Mavali Olam. The people who rule the world are someone who's foolishly pious, someone who's a wily Rasha, wily evildoer, an ascetic woman, and the wounds of ascetics, right? Like people that in seeking spirituality or something like that, kind of harm themselves. These are destroyers of the world, because their behavior is duplicitous and or insincere. Okay. So the beginning of our Mishnah dealt with the erasing of the Sotah parchment. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel Mishum Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda said, when I was learning with Rabbi Akiva, I would put this kankantum, which seems to be like some kind of a gum substance. So something that made the ink more durable, like indelible. But the law he didn't say anything to me. He didn't have any problem with that. So Rabbi Shmuel, I came to Rabbi Shmuel. Amarli said, "B'ni mamalach." Oh, what do you do for a living? Amarli lavarni. He said, "I'm a scroll." Amarli b'ni havei zayir shamlach malecha shemayi. You should be careful with your work because it's the work of heaven. Shema tachzir osachas or tatir osachas. Because if you leave out one letter or add one letter to a Torah, it's like destroying the whole world. Amarti lo. I said to him, I said to him, by the way, I put an extra ingredient in my ink. The kankantum shmo, it's this kankantum which makes it more durable. He said, are you allowed to do that? There are cases where you have to erase a passage in the Torah, specifically the Sotah case. So it has to be, meaning it has to be what's the opposite of indelible? Indelible?
Yeah,
Indelible ink. I don't know if that's
indelible.
but you get the idea. So this Rabbi Meir objected to Rabbi Shmuel objected to using this indelible ingredient. My So what is this discussion really about? Like what let's get a little deeper. This is what Rameir said to him. When Rameir says, you're doing God's work, and so Rabbi Meir was saying is lo mebay b'chaseros v'yaseros. Not only am I an expert in making sure that I'm copying correctly, no extra or omitted letters. Debakiana, I'm an expert. Ella afilu lemecha shlizvu, but even like I'm very careful that even like if a fly comes by and dips his leg and smears the ink a little bit, like if he smudges the ink so that one letter turns into another. So for example, a dalid can easily become erased just by losing the little tag at the top. So for that reason, I put this ingredient in the ink so that can't happen. So I'm being like extra careful that even though I'm an expert and I do it right, that accidents won't happen. So that's why I use this kankantum. So Aini's of course says, is that really what Reb Meir said? Tanya, we have a brisa. Amar Reb Meir. Reb Meir says, Torah, so Rabbi Shmuel, when I was learning with Rabbi Shmuel, I put in this ingredient into the ink. I didn't say anything, didn't protest. When I came to Rabbi Kiva, he said, you can't do that, right? So, kasha shimush hashimush. So the first of all, this is backwards from the original statement, right? It's like first in the other one, it was first he was with Rabbi Akiva, and then he went to Rabbi Shmuel, and here it's the other way around. And Kashya Asara, and like who, here we also switched around who allowed this ingredient and who forbade it. So Bishlam Kasha. So Morris says, I don't really care so much about like which one he came to first. Mekaras Lakami Rabbi Akiva. Came to Lamatzi Kamalibe. First he came to Rabbi Akiva, but it didn't work out for him. He wasn't doing so well with Rabbi Akiva as a teacher. Also Lakami to Rabbi Shmuel, with Gamar Gemara. Then he went to Rabbi Shmuel, and there he learned well. Hadar also Lakami to Rabbi Akiva, Sarasvara. Then he went back to Rabbi Akiva, and then once he was knowledgeable, then Rabbi Akiva was a good teacher for him. So it's like Rabbi Shmuel taught him knowledge, and Rabbi Akiva taught him analytic skills. So so the order is good. Like he went to Rabbi Akiva both before and after Rabbi Shmuel. So it doesn't matter what order you put it in; it would be correct. Ela Asara Kasha. But a good question is like which one of them permitted this extra ingredient and which did not. So Kasha Gemara says, yeah, it's true. These sources contradict. We don't know which is correct. Tanya Rabbi Bryce. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Omer Hay Rabbi Meir Lakom Matil Kankantam L'Ton Chadiyah. Rabbi Meir used to say, for every writing of the Torah, for everything that you write, in Scripture, you can use this indelible ingredient. Except when you're writing the Sotah passage. So it appears to me like even in the Torah itself, like not just when you copy this one passage for the Sotah ceremony, but even when you're writing a whole Torah and you come to the parsha of Sotah, the ink you use for that parsha has to be delible. Rabbi Yaakov says in the name of Rabbi Meir, no, Rabbi Meir only meant not when you're writing in the Torah, but when you write the Sotah thing for the ritual. What's the difference? The question is, if you used a whole Sefer Torah, you took a whole Sefer Torah and scraped, let's say you had to do a Sotah ceremony and no parchment to be had, right? But you need to to erase this parsha of the Torah, right? So you couldn't copy it separately because for whatever reason. So you took a whole Torah and you scrape off that parsha, that paragraph from the Torah. So, so if that is permitted, then you have to be careful not to use indelible ink when you write that part of the Torah. But if it's not permitted, there would be no point. There wouldn't be no scenario where you would scrape that off from an actual full Torah. And so you could use indelible ink for that portion of the Torah. And this is parallel to another argument of Tanaim. The Tanya, we have a brisa. The parchment of one sota is not good to use for another sota. Like we saw in the Mishnah, that you have to, if it's not used, then you have to store it away. It can't be used for somebody else. Rav Achai bar Yoshi Omer, Rav Achai says, no, it's fine to use it for another one. There's no identifying details on this parchment, and so it doesn't have to be written specifically for the actual person in front of you. You could store them up. So that argument maybe seems to accord with whether a Torah scroll could be used for the ceremony, because obviously a Torah scroll is not written for a whole Torah is not written for a sotah, right? It's written in general for a different use. If you say that you could use something that's not written particularly for one sotah for this ritual, then that would mean that you could use a Torah scroll, and if not. But the Gemara doesn't like this analogy of these arguments or how they line up. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not really the same discussion. Maybe it's like maybe there's a difference between writing something like in general, not for a particular person. Like if you write a whole Sefer Torah, then it's okay to use it for somebody who it wasn't written for. But if a scroll was written specifically for one woman, then maybe you would still say it can't be used for a different woman. But the Torah, which is just written not for the purpose of a sotah ceremony, but just written in general, maybe you could use that. Rav Nachman Yitzchak, and Rav Nachman Yitzchak has a different reason why it's not necessarily the same argument. Dilma Lohi. Ad kan lokama Rabbi Achai bar Yosha Hasam El B'Migel Dichtu V'Shum Olos Ba'olam. Maybe when Rabbi Achai said that that the scroll doesn't have to be written for a particular woman, that's only in the case of a scroll that was written for the specific purpose of a sotah. It doesn't have to be the same sotah, it was written for a sotah, but maybe a Torah which was not written for the purpose of a sotah, it's written for the purpose of having a Torah. Maybe that is not valid to use for a sotah. Torah, the Islamic siva, the reason you write a Torah is to teach, to study, to read it. Maybe that can't be erased for a sotah. Okay. Rav Achai bar Yoshia, what about this view of Rav Achai bar Yoshia, who says that you can use one for another, or what scroll written for one, you can use it for someone else? Leisley, doesn't he agree with the following Mishnah? If you have a get, a divorce, and you write a bill of divorce for your wife, and then you change your mind, you're not going to divorce her, you haven't given it to her yet. And you're not going to use it. And then your neighbor finds you and he says, you know what? Our names are both, Yaakov, and our wives both. Each of us have a wife named Leah, right? You already have a divorce. I want to divorce my wife. You already have the bill of divorce that Yaakov is divorcing Leah that you wrote for yourself or for your wife. Why don't I buy that off of you? Rather than commission a sofer to a scribe to write me a new bill of divorce, I'll save some money. I'll use yours, right? So pasul garshmo, you can't do that. If the bill of divorce was written for one husband for one wife, you can't use it for another husband and another. So wouldn't you say the same thing about the sotah, right? Well, obviously that's not necessarily a good analogy because they're two different things. The answer is Amr. They said, "Asam v'kasav lam rachmana." In the case of divorce, the Torah says v'kasav la. He writes for her, meaning he writes for his wife a a bill of divorce, a get. So by saying for her, it implies it has to be written, for this specific husband and specific wife. It can't be reused by somebody else. So being it has to be written for, for this, with the intention of use by specific people. So hachanami v'asala. Wait, but in case of the Sotah, it also says, when it sums up, it says, if so this is what you do in case of a Sotah situation, and you do for her or to her all of these things. So again, it says to her. So shouldn't you say that everything has to be specifically done for this particular person? You can't reuse the scroll. So maybe this is the same thing. And then why would Rav Achai say that it's okay to reuse it? So Gemara says, "Mayasiya mechika." No, we're talking about erasing the scroll. That's what the action that the Torah is talking about. The important part is the erasing of the scroll. That has to be done for the specific person. Obviously, that's not something that you can transfer, or maybe it means that once the water has been prepared with the ink, it can only be used for this woman. But as far as writing the scroll in the first place, as long as it hasn't been used yet to scrape into the water, it can be used for anybody else. And so Rav Achai could indeed hold that, even though it says via salah, the doing for her doesn't include the writing. Okay, so back to our Mishnah. Ena maspekes lishtos anshapanem arikos. So right away she starts showing the effects of the water if she's guilty. Mani, whose position is this? Rabbi Shimon. This is Rabbi Shimon. Who says that first you, as we saw yesterday, first you sacrifice the mincha and then you give her the water. The common law carbon because as long as the mincha hasn't been offered, the waters don't do anything. As it's written, a mincha of memory reminding you of sin. So according to Rabbi Shimon, it would only work like that. That it happens right away. The water affects her right away if the mincha has already been offered, because the mincha is a prerequisite for the effects of the water. If the mincha has not yet been offered, then drinking the water wouldn't start the effects yet. It would only start later upon sacrificing the mincha. But since Rabbi Shimon holds the mincha comes first, and then the water, so the water works right away. Amos Sefer, where it says, what about the end of the Mishnah? Yesh cheskus, if she has merit, haisatola, then it's delayed. Asan Rabbanan. So this is the rabbis. The Rabbi Shimon, that same Rabbi Shimon also says this doesn't work. This merit thing, it works right away regardless of merit, right? So if you want to say the Mishnah is like Rabbi Shimon, then the end of the Mishnah doesn't make sense because Rabbi Shimon doesn't agree that the effects can be delayed by your merit. His answer is Hamani Rabbi Akiva. This Mishnah is authored by Rabbi Akiva. That takes two sides. It takes Rabbi Shimon's position on one issue and not on the other issue. The Amar Rabbi Akiva says Makris Michasav Yakar Mashka. So he agrees with Rabbi Shimon that first comes the mincha and then the water, and then the effects take place right after she drinks. But as far as whether merit can delay the effects, he holds like the rabbis that it can happen that way. So so Rabbi Akiva's view is reflected in both parts of our Mishnah. Okay, so the next part of the Mishnah was Hemamrim Hotziyua. The people saw the effects of the water starting, they would say, take her out of the temple right away so that she doesn't make things tummy. My tama, why? Because she might die. So wait a minute, we're talking about the Azara, which is the temple courtyard, right? So is there a restriction on having dead bodies in the temple courtyard? Maybe not. Tanya, we have a brisa. It's a person who is tame to a dead by contact with a dead body can go into the Machne Leviyah. So the temple structure is based on the camp in the desert, right, where you had in the center was Machne Kahuna, where the tent was and where the Kohanim were present, and then surrounding that was where the Leviim lived. where they camped, and that is corresponding in the temple to the Azara, to the courtyard. And then you had around that was the rest of the people, and that is like the rest of the rest of the city of Jerusalem or the whole country or whatever. So Machne Levia is it corresponds to the temple courtyard, and this source says that a person who is Tame can go into the temple courtyard, into the Machne Levia. And not only a person who is Tame from a dead person, um, even the dead body itself can go in there. Shenamar, as it's written, Vayikach Moshe Sasmos Yosefima. Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him. Ima ben Chisaso. So Moshe was a Levi, right? He was a son of Amram, who was from the tribe of Levi. So presumably he lived. His camp or his tent or whatever was in the Machne Levia, and he had the bones of Yosef with him. So clearly, it's okay to have dead bodies in the temple courtyard. Abai says no. The problem is not that she might die. Maybe she'll start to menstruate, and that a woman who is a nida is not permitted, is kind of excluded from the Machne Levia, from the temple courtyard. Remember to be Susa Marpia. So wait. So why would she start to menstruate? Because of the shock of the whole ceremony and the effects of the ritual. Ian Score says yes, but about Esther, when she heard about the decree that all the Jewish people were going to be killed, she became very agitated. Rav says this means she became a nida. She started menstruating, indicating that the effects of a terrible event. The agitation caused by it can cause a woman to have her period. So the same thing might be true of the Sotah, and that's why they wanted to remove her from the temple courtyard. But the Gemara says, don't we have another Mishnah? That fear actually kind of stops the blood from flowing. So the Gemara says, Pachta Tsamis. Fear that is kind of gradual, right? That doesn't suddenly come on you, but you become anxious. That actually stops up your breathing. Biasusa marapia, but a sudden scare, like the effects of the waters, which you could actually argue with this. You could say that the whole ceremony is kind of a gradual thing that leads up to this, but actually, I guess feeling the effects of this on your body is a sudden thing, and that could actually bring on menstruation. Now, yesh l'schus haisatola. So the Mishnah said that if she had some merit, then it could delay the effects of the waters by 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. Mani Masnisin, who is this Mishnah according to? Lo Abba ben Yossi ben Chanan, Lo Rabbi Elazar ben Yitzchak, Ish Kfar Daram, Lo Rabbi Shmuel. None of these three. Tanya, because we have another brisa. Im yesh l'schus, if she has a merit, Tola Shlosh Chodashim, it could abate her punishment for 3 months. Kadei Hakar Sovar. That's how long it takes for a woman who becomes pregnant for her to show, right? That you can tell that she's pregnant. Or for herself to know, whatever. That's Rabbi Yossi's view. 3 months that it can be delayed. Rabbi Elazar ben Yitzchak Ishvar Daram Omer. Rabbi Elazar says Tisha Hadashim 9 months. Shenamar ben Niksa ben Yisrael Azara, because the good effects take 9 months to come about, meaning the birth of a child. So the bad effects can also be held off that long. Yusupar, and Zera, that she'll become fertile, seed literally. How do I know what that means? Zera haroy l'saper. That means seed that will be good enough to sing God's praises. So, in other words, so you could interpret this as Nizra Azara, that she becomes pregnant, that the seed is implanted in her. That happens right away, but he's choosing to interpret it as Zera means a seed that is born, when it becomes fitting to praise God, meaning once it's born and once it's alive. So that's the 9 months. And so similarly, the punishment can be delayed by 9 months. And Rabbi Shmuel says 12 months. I don't have a scriptural proof for this, but I have an allusion to it. Lahain Malka, Milki Yishpar Allah. This is Daniel speaking to Cyrus, King Cyrus. And he says, let my advice be accepted by you, and redeem your sins with charity, and your sins with by being kind to the poor. And that will give you an extension on your peace, on your tranquility. Is a good translation. So indicating that there's a reward, that he's advising the king, you're going to get an extension of the good life by being good to the poor. So uksiv kol amata al Nebuchadnezzar malcha, and then the next verse says all of the punishments that were in this dream that was being interpreted happened to the king. Sorry, Nebuchadnezzar, not Cyrus. Uksiv lichtzas yarchin treyasar. And then it says after 12 months. So, in other words, why did the bad omens in the dream come true after 12 months? He must have taken Daniel's advice and been charitable to the poor. So we see an indication that bad news can be pushed off, or bad effects can be pushed off by 12 months. Anyway, 12 months, although it's more or less a year, but it's not always a year. 12 months can be, even if you say it's a year, our Mishnah said it could be 2 years or 3 years. So none of these views corresponds to the options of the Mishnah, 1, 2, or 3 year delay. So Leon Rabbi Shmuel, actually we can say that that it is Rabbi Shmuel, which is this third view in this brisa, that Nebuchadnezzar's punishment was delayed by 1 year. And he, Rabbi Shmuel, found a pasuk that says up to 3 times God will give you that extension. God says for 3, I've kind of extended a grace period, or I've forgiven or overlooked 3 sins of Adam, but the 4th one, it continues, I'm not going to show forbearance anymore. So showing that the forbearance can be repeated 3 times. So Rabbi Shmuel says, Nebuchadnezzar's experience indicates that God can give you forbearance of 12 months, and then he'll do it again and again. So that's 1, 2, or 3 years. Umay. But what does Rabbi Shmuel mean when he says, why doesn't he say that this is a good proof? It's just an illusion, but not really a scriptural proof. Maybe because Nebuchadnezzar is a non-Jewish person, and so maybe God is not so strict with non-Jews, right? Maybe, as we've seen in other places, that a tzaddik can be punished in what seems to be a more severe way than a regular person, because he's closer to God. His sins are more, or his oversights are more severely judged, or his errors are more severely judged. You could say the same thing about Nebuchadnezzar. Maybe he's being let off the hook, but maybe that wouldn't apply to the Sotah, right, who's Jewish. So that's why he doesn't consider it a really good proof, but still it's an indication. And we will stop here for today. Have a good day, everybody.